Now, what about you, Shakita? Because I know you went through the same experience too. Did you see any signs before this type of situation happened?
Well, actually, I've had two situations. I was molested at the age of 5 by my uncle, and it took me years and years before I could go to my grandmother, which was that was their son, and say, "Look, this is what happened." I waited until I was in my early 20s before I actually said, "You know what? This is what your son has done to me." And a lot of times, it's fear. It's fear of the unknown. The unknown meaning that you don't know if they're going to believe you or not. And that's what I went through for so many years because I was not, quote unquote, the perfect kid. So it made it a lot harder for me to confess and say, you know what, this is what happened because I already knew that they wasn't going to believe me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I waited till I was in my early 20s. Now, so far as being in a domestic relationship where I was physically abused, not at all. I was in a relationship where I was verbally abused.
Right.
I was in a relationship with my ex-husband where my family didn't fit, quote unquote, the American dream family or whatever. I didn't fit the mommy doctor, the father lawyer, whatever the case. My mother was on drugs, dual diagnosed schizophrenic, never knew who my father was. So it just was like, oh, look at, you're a product of this right here. You're just a part of, this crazy family, or, the fruit didn't fall too far from the tree because this is where you came from.
Right.
So being that said, I had to deal with the verbal abuse, which was more devastating to me than somebody putting their hands on me. Because I had to replay everything this person said every time we get to arguing, and he always made sure that I remembered, you understand, that I was not perfect, or this is where I came from, and this is what he was not used to. So,
This is very deep so far. Now, what about you, Stephanie Jones? I know you had a similar experience as well.
Well, I've experienced both sexual abuse as a child from ages 5 till I was 13 by different men in my family. So it wasn't one person, as in Shakita's case, it was several different people in my family. But I've also experienced the physical abuse as well. I was in a very physically abusive relationship for a number of years. But I believe the sexual abuse that I experienced as a child made the physical abuse that I began to experience in a relationship easier for me to deal with, because at that point I was used to being hurt.
Okay, let's touch on both domestic abuse and sexual abuse. One of the questions I want to ask you, ladies, is how does domestic abuse and sexual abuse affect a person's mind or affects a person's mentality? Like, do they go on through years having to be paranoid when they get into different relationships? Like, what's the deal?
Well, if you're sexually abused as a child, that one weakens your self-esteem to begin with. You are damaged, emotionally, and that's why I touch on sexual abuse in children in my book as well, and it definitely does weaken a child's self-esteem. It weakens your self-worth. And I hear men say that have abused children, oh, they'll forget, or they shouldn't. I don't think they'll remember. It's no big deal to them. It's just sex, but it's so much more. And like the lady was saying, I'm sorry. It is, a lot of men are abused too, but it's hidden, and sometimes a man that is abused will become an abuser as well. It's just a cycle that happens, and then they're acting out on, I'm going to hit this woman. It's a control issue, because there's always, the Bible says behind every spirit is a spirit, so you have to realize, but you're not a psychiatrist. If you're a woman, get out of it if you're being abused. But we're just talking about sometimes why it happens, and abusers abuse a lot of times, especially if they're a man.
And I'm glad you brought that up too. And some of the excuses that I would hear from guys that would put their hands on their wives or on their spouse, on their girlfriend, is, well, you wouldn't have given me a reason to hit you if you did what you were supposed to do, or if you did that, or if you didn't say this.
But it's a weak man that will hit a woman. It's a very weak man that would hit a woman.
Oh,
Yeah.
not only weak, but a punk.
Yeah.
A punk
Right,
with a
Absolutely.
capital
but
P.
it's a man. It's a weak man that needs help. You know,
Yeah, I
that
think they're
needs
more
healing.
damaged.
Mhm.
Right, they're
That's it.
damaged
You
as
wanna
They're
well.
expound?
damaged.
Mhm.
I think they're more damaged, you know, even with what we're seeing in the media and even what we see across the board. Let's not just talk about men, let's talk about some of the issues that women struggle with as well when we are also doing some of the crazy things that we're out here doing in the world, not just the brothers out here, but some of the women out here as well. It's because we're damaged. I always go back to what is the root cause?
Right.
Why do we do what we do? And that's what we tend not to deal with, is the root cause of our problems.
Right.
And so most men, anytime someone hurts someone, there's a root cause behind that.
Absolutely.
Hurting people hurt people.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
And I just want to add to what she's saying. If you look at, and I'm going to explain something to you. If you take women, especially African American women, okay, and you take the anger, the violence some of us have towards the black men, and I'm going to get somewhere in a minute. But 9 times out of 10, a lot of us are raised by what?
Women.
Single
That's right.
parent black women.
That's right.
Okay? And 9 times out of 10, guess what? The fathers are not in the home. So let me explain where I'm going with this. When you have an angry black woman raising black young daughters, 9 times out of 10, that creates a grown or growing angry black daughter. Let me explain where I'm going with this. Now, why you think that the relationships with black households are diminishing? Why we're always getting divorced opposed to other races in the country? Because what you normally hear in a single black household is the mother saying, oh, well, your daddy ain't crap. He didn't do this. He's not doing nothing for you. So when you grow up as a black female, you're like, oh, well, I don't need a man because my daddy, he didn't do anything for me either. So guess what? And what happens is you bring that into a relationship. This is something that didn't start today. It started from back then. And you have to understand your society and your environment molds you to where you are. And that's why I always say when I see people that act real crazy sometimes, like, you know what? I can't blame them because this is what they've been used to. This is how they was trained. This is how they was raised. This is the product of the environment that this is what they see. So a lot of times when you see women or whatever that acts aggressively in relationships and fight and they wonder why their husband's cheating or whatever, and they throw all the clothes out in the middle of the road, you have to understand, and it start today. It was something that was created in the past. Right. And it evolves and it grows until someone says, you know what, I want to break the cycle. This has to stop.
Right. Because I really believe that the cycle, if we're going to go with the black community, I believe you can go all the way back to slavery because our men were sold off, our families were broken up, and it's just been a cycle ever since, if you look at the history of it. But like she said, we have to realize the root cause, and then there's something that has to be done to break the cycle. So discussions are necessary to get the dialogue out there, because the black community right now it's really messed up, because a lot of, like she said, there's a lot of single parents that, it's just like a normal thing. It's just, my mom raised me or my grandmother raised me. It's not super duper rare to find two parents, but sometimes it's a stepfather or, it's not the original family, and there is a lot of damage that goes along with that. You have stepfathers sometimes that abuse their...
Dropping some serious knowledge, you know. And I'm glad you said that, because this is the type of dialogue that most of us, we need to have, both men and women, because I remember doing a radio interview with you a couple of months back, or about a year or so ago. You said that, and this is when Stephanie was on my radio show, you said that this was the type of thing that is being swept under the rug. It's something that we don't hardly talk about unless it's something that happens in Hollywood with certain celebrities. Of course, not to say any names or anything like that, we all hear the stories about this particular celebrity putting their hands on a celebrity, and that's when we want to start talking about it. It becomes a big wake-up call, becomes an issue. So I'm glad that you brought that up. dropping some serious knowledge.